The forest surrounding the village of Verona had never known true daylight. Even when the sun rose, its light filtered through a ceiling of twisted branches and dying leaves, creating an eternal dusk. The villagers called it the breath of the witch, a curse laid upon their land 999 years ago. The story began long before memory, when the valley was still alive with rivers and green fields. A woman named Ira, born under the eclipse moon, was said to possess the gift of speaking to shadows. She lived alone, far from the villagers who both feared and sought her. Some came for healing, others came for vengeance, all left owing something, a piece of memory, a drop of blood, or a promise they could never keep. Over time, fear turned to hatred. The church in the valley rose to power, and the whispers about Ira grew darker. They said she had summoned storms, poisoned wells, and lured children into the woods. One autumn night, when the harvest moon turned red, the villagers came for her with torches and chains. They dragged her through the mud to the church square, a circle of stone that would later be called the ground of the dead. There, beneath the cracked statue of a saint, they bound her to a post and read her sins aloud. But Ira did not beg. Her eyes were calm, ancient, and unblinking. "You think you kill me," she whispered, as the flames touched her feet. "But I am not the one who will burn." When the fire reached her face, the air changed. A wind howled through the valley, carrying her final breath into every home, every child, every unborn soul. The flames rose high, then turned black, sucking the color out of the night. Those who watched said they felt something slip into their lungs, cold, invisible, and eternal. By morning, Ira was gone. Her body had turned to ash, but her shadow remained, burned into the stone like a wound that would never heal. And from that night onward, Verona began to die. The crops withered, animals vanished, and people started hearing voices in the dark, not from ghosts, but from their own reflections. The old church bell rang by itself at midnight, tolling 13 times instead of 12. Generations passed, and the curse became tradition. Each Halloween, the villagers left offerings at the edge of the woods, candles, bread, and a drop of their own blood, hoping the witch's spirit would spare them another year. Yet every Halloween, one soul still vanished. Sometimes an elder, sometimes a child, always one. They called it the taking. Now, on the eve of the 999th year, the mist returned thicker than ever. It crawled down the hills like liquid smoke, swallowing the last lights of the village. Inside her small wooden house, Mara, the last surviving priestess of the old faith, sat by a dying fire. The book of rituals lay open before her, its pages covered in dust and faint crimson stains. She had seen the signs, the cracked moon, the silent crows, the bell tolling 13 times again. The curse was ready to awaken. Mara whispered the forbidden prayer under her breath, her trembling fingers tracing the burned sigil drawn centuries ago by Ira herself. "May the breath return to the witch," she said, "and end the hunger that binds us." But as her voice faded, the fire dimmed, and from within the shadows, two eyes opened. Not human, not alive, just waiting. The air turned heavy, thick with the scent of old earth and something burning. The pages of the book fluttered though there was no wind. Then a whisper came, soft, cold, and everywhere at once. "You speak my name as if it can save you." Mara froze. Her lips trembled. "Ira, the 999th year," the voice replied. "One breath remains. One soul must answer." The candle beside her cracked, spilling molten wax across the table. In its faint light, she saw her reflection in the window, but the face looking back wasn't hers. It was Ira's, eyes glowing red like dying embers. And just before the flame went out, Mara saw the valley through that reflection, every house, every soul, every heartbeat glowing faintly in the dark, like stars waiting to be extinguished. The curse had awoken. Outside, the wind began to sing, a sound like hundreds of voices breathing the same word. Remember. And from beneath the ashes of the old church, a shape began to rise. The witch's shadow, burned into stone for centuries, peeled itself free and turned toward the village. The 999-year curse had begun again. By dawn, the mist had swallowed the village whole. The bell in the old church tolled again, not by human hand, but by the wind that came from the forest. Its sound rolled through the valley like a mourning cry, echoing off the empty houses and dead fields. Far beyond the river, a lone traveler approached the valley gate. His cloak was heavy with ash, his boots caked in mud. Around his neck hung a rusted chain with a black cross, and on his belt, a book bound in iron. His name was Father Corin, though he no longer served any church. He was what the monasteries whispered about, but never named aloud. An exorcist of the Forgotten Order, one who hunted the remnants of curses that even the holy feared. He had followed the signs, livestock slaughtered by invisible hands, stars that flickered out midnight, dreams that left frost upon the skin. Each clue led him here, to the cursed valley of Verona. The villagers met him with silence. No one opened their doors. Curtains fluttered, eyes watched, but no one spoke. The smell of burned wax and rotting herbs hung thick in the air. On every door, a small circle of ash had been drawn, the mark of protection, though weak and fading. Corin knelt beside one door, touched the mark, and muttered, "You're not keeping her out. You're inviting her in." At the center of the village stood the church, blackened stone, cracked bell tower, and walls carved with forgotten symbols. Inside, the air was colder than winter itself. Dust fell from the rafters like snow. In the middle of the floor, the stone circle where Ira had been burned was still visible, and the outline of her shadow pulsed faintly, like a living wound. Corin opened his iron-bound book. Inside, instead of prayers, there were names of spirits, demons, and the dead. He turned to a page written in dried blood. Ira of the Forgotten Breath. A note beneath it read, "Do not summon. She answers only to her own name." He sighed and whispered, "Then let her come." He placed 3 candles around the stone circle, lit them, and began to recite the ancient words. His voice echoed, deep and hollow. "By light unburned, by soul unbound, reveal the curse that feeds this ground." The air shimmered. The candles flickered blue. From the cracks in the stone, black mist seeped upward, coiling like smoke through water. Then came the whisper, low, familiar, and almost gentle. "Another priest to bless the ashes?" Corin's jaw tightened. "I am not here to bless. I am here to end." "End." The voice laughed, the sound echoing from every wall. "You cannot end what was promised." The mist rose higher, taking form, a woman's silhouette made of shadow and flame, her eyes twin embers in the dark. Ira. She moved closer, each step leaving scorched marks on the floor. Corin stood his ground, raising the iron book like a shield. "Your curse has lived too long, witch. Let it die with me." Ira tilted her head. "You think you're the first to try?" I have watched 900 years of men like you, priests, hunters, kings, all feeding the fire they sought to kill." Her voice deepened, layered with 1,000 whispers. "Do you know why the curse remains, Exorcist?" Corin hesitated. "Because you never burned the right body," she said, and smiled. At that moment, the church bell tolled once more, but this time from within the floor. The stone beneath Corin cracked open, revealing a coffin-shaped void filled with swirling darkness. Inside it, faint bones shimmered, and he realized they weren't human. "Dear God," he whispered, "it wasn't her body they burned." "No," she breathed, her voice now beside his ear. "It was my sister's." The shadows around him came alive, hands, faces, fragments of memory, clawing toward him like drowning souls. Corin stumbled back, clutching his cross. The metal burned his palm, glowing faintly red. "Then where are you buried?" he shouted. The witch smiled through the darkness. "In every breath you take." The candles blew out. The church plunged into blackness. When light returned, faint and gray, Corin found himself lying outside, on the steps of the church. His book was gone. The iron chain around his neck had rusted completely, as if it had aged centuries overnight. The village was silent again, too silent. Smoke rose from chimneys, but no one was there. Doors hung open, meals half-eaten, toys lying in the dirt, but the people themselves had vanished. All except one. A little girl stood at the end of the road, barefoot, wearing a white dress smeared with ash. She looked at Corin with wide, empty eyes. "She said you would come," the girl whispered. "She said the last soul has to choose." Corin's breath caught. "Choose what?" The girl smiled faintly, and in her eyes flickered the same crimson glow as Iris. "Who dies before dawn." The mist rolled back in from the forest, carrying the faint sound of chanting, hundreds of voices whispering the same word again and again. "Remember." Corin stood, trembling, staring at the church. Its shadow on the ground was no longer still. It was moving. The sun never rose that day. A dull crimson glow lingered above the valley, as if the sky itself had bled. The wind carried no warmth, only whispers. The year of the final curse had begun. Father Corin walked through the empty streets, his breath shallow, his eyes burning from the mist that clung to his skin like cobweb. Every door he passed was open. Every window stared like a hollow eye. No birds, no sound, only the bell, tolling once every hour, the voice of a ghost counting down to midnight. He reached the center of the village, where the ground of the dead lay, the same circle of stone where Ira had once burned, and where her shadow now moved beneath the cracks like smoke trapped in glass. Around it, candles flickered in bowls of blood. Someone had drawn a new symbol across the stones, an inverted crescent and 3 dots, painted in something too dark to be ink. The little girl was there, standing barefoot at the edge of the circle. Her white dress fluttered in wind that no longer touched anything else. In her hands, she held Corin's iron-bound book. "You dropped this," she said softly. He took a cautious step forward. "What is your name?" She smiled faintly. "Ira called me Memory." The word itself made the air tighten. "What do you want from me?" Corin asked. She looked at the horizon, where the first star, or maybe the last, blinked faintly through the red fog. "The curse began with a breath," she whispered. "It must end with one." The bell tolled again, louder, deeper. From every direction came the sound of footsteps, not flesh against earth, but stone grinding on stone. Corin turned and froze. Figures were emerging from the mist. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, pale and translucent, their eyes hollow. The lost souls of Verona. They gathered silently around the circle, forming a ring of faded faces. "You're the taken," Corin breathed. The girl nodded. "We return every Halloween to remember what was promised." The ground trembled. Cracks spread from the circle outward, glowing faintly with molten light. From beneath the earth came a whisper, older than the wind, older than the valley itself. "One breath remains." Corin dropped to his knees. His cross glowed white-hot against his chest. "What happens if the breath is taken?" The girl turned toward him, eyes now burning red. "Then the curse ends. The witch rests. And everything that borrowed her breath, including you, must return it." He understood then. The curse wasn't just over the village. It was inside everyone who had ever lived there, carried forward through generations. He was breathing her. Every soul in Verona was part of her dying exhale. The bell rang again, 13 times. The wind stopped. The world held its breath. Then she appeared. Ira rose from the center of the circle, her form now complete, neither flesh nor shadow, but something in between. Her hair flowed like smoke, her skin the color of cold ashes, and her eyes burned with unending hunger. "It is time," she said. Corin stood, trembling, clutching his cross. "If a soul must be taken, take mine." The witch tilted her head. "A willing soul ends the curse, but only if it breathes its last willingly." He closed his eyes. "Then so be it." The girl stepped back as Ira moved forward, her hand reaching for Corin's chest. But as her fingers touched him, she froze. A strange light pulsed beneath his ribs, faint, golden, like dawn breaking through stone. "You carry more than breath," she whispered. "You carry faith." Corin's eyes opened. "Then let faith burn the curse." He grasped her hand, forcing it deeper against his chest. Pain seared through him, fire and frost together. The ground shook. The souls around the circle began to scream, not in agony, but release. Ira's eyes widened. The red in them flickered to white. The mist twisted upward in spirals as if the entire valley exhaled at once. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the world erupted in light. When it cleared, the circle was empty. The witch was gone. So was Corin. The little girl stood alone amid the ashes, her dress torn, her eyes human again. The first true dawn in centuries spilled across the valley, warm and golden. The curse had broken, but as the villagers began to return, dazed, alive, as if waking from a 1,000-year dream, the girl looked toward the forest. There, at the edge of the trees, stood a figure cloaked in shadow. A man with familiar eyes, holding a rusted cross. He smiled once, gently, and vanished into the mist. The bell tolled one final time, and on the cracked stone where Ira had burned, only a single word remained, carved deep and glowing faintly gold. "Remember,